Talk shoes.
Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Castle Dracula podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we kick off the Evil Baby Retrospective with a look at the immortal horror classic, Rosemary's Baby. Bear in mind that if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the brand new book, Alex Van Helsing, Triumph of Death from HarperCollins. So look for it at Amazon or your local store. With me are Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find at HalloweenMan.com. Say hello, Drew.
Hello, baby.
Hello, Tony Salvaggio, creator of Psychom Book 3, coming this August, which is like in a couple of days. This month, next August, for Right Stuff and Tokyo Pop. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
I totally blew all of that, and I'm sorry, but truly, Psychom Book 3 in August, which will be in a couple of days, the month will anyway. I'm still blowing
August 21st, I think, is the release date.
August 21st. No man ever took so long to say August 21st. And we've got color commentary from the one and the only, the attorney, Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Buonasera.
Buonasera. Okay, Rosemary's Baby. Now, to steal from Wikipedia, this is what Rosemary's Baby is about. Mia Farrow plays a pregnant woman who fears that her husband may have made a pact with their eccentric neighbors, believing that he may have promised them the child to be used as a human sacrifice in their occult rituals in exchange for success in his acting career. That is as boiled down as any synopsis can get. I used to do full synopses, and I just gave up on them years ago because we'll go through it all anyway. But if you have not seen Rosemary's Baby and you're wondering if you're going to see it, you're going to hear everything spoiled in this because we're going to talk about it. I want to start with first impressions on this classic that's going to kick off our Evil Baby retrospective. And let's go Tony, Drew, Julia, and me. Tony, first impressions, Rosemary's Baby.
It had been a little while since I'd seen it, but I like the movie a lot. It's definitely like a slow burn kind of movie. It's one of the few things where I feel it's like one of the better. I know it's adapted from a novel, but it feels like a Lovecraft story by the time you get all the way through it. The reveal and everything, it feels like it should be, actually it's, could be a modern day kind of dumb witch horror kind of thing. And I like it a lot. It's got great, everybody, all the acting's great. It's an awesome movie. You just have to, sit with it. You have to be in it to really kind of get the modern horror of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Who do we say next? Drew, opening first thoughts, first impressions.
Well, this is going to sound odd because at first it's going to sound like I don't like this movie, which is the opposite of true. When I first saw this movie, and I have to point this out, I saw this movie when I was the very first time when I was 8 or 9, that young. And I remember being so bored with it. It's slow. He's right saying it's a slow burn. But, I came back to it when I was a teenager and, up into my 20s and, now in my 30s. And this is a great example of, metropolitan Gothic. I think would be the best way to describe it. Because you have, this supernatural evil juxtapositioned against, so much mundane stuff that anybody that dwells in a city kind of lives around, nosy old people,
yes,
cabs, it's. And I actually would go so far as to say is I do think this is probably one of the quintessential New York City movies. It's so wonderfully atmospheric and so well acted, so well cast, and Roman Polanski, of course, is a legendary filmmaker, but I would actually say that, either this or Chinatown, to me, are the definitive Polanski films.
He really does a fantastic New York. Julia, first impressions of, and I can't wait to hear, just as I know Drew's going to give us some good stuff on William Castle, I can't wait to hear your thoughts representing the female half of the species in this movie.
Well, that's a lot of pressure, represent the whole half of the species.
Right. It's all you, baby. First impressions.
I love this movie. I remembered seeing it a million years ago, but I didn't remember that much about it, except for, of course, I remembered like the last scene, just and the whatever you want to call that sequence, the impregnation sequence. I remember those pretty well, but everything else is kind of a blur. It's such a fun film. I mean, there's so much. It's not as scary as I remembered it being. I think it's more spooky than scary. But it is just fantastic, and there's a lot of neat details I can't wait to get into.
I can't wait to hear from you and from all of you, actually. For me, I'm not aware that I've ever actually seen the whole movie. I know that I've seen probably the last 45 minutes, maybe even just literally the last 10 minutes, probably on clip shows or retrospectives or something. It's possible that when John Bloom came through doing his sort of slideshow where he was just showing scenes and lecturing, I think I may have seen the end then, but I don't think I ever saw it. So what a delightful movie. I mean, first of all, I have this major fetish for the 60s, and I love, I was born after the 60s, very, very shortly after the 60s, and so I love seeing all the clothes. I was watching it with Julia, and I was like, can I just go live in the 60s, because I wanted to be there. And this is like, Drew's right, this is like this amazing Woody Allen horror movie. It is the best New York I've ever seen. It is so gorgeous. I mean, it makes me want to go back to New York probably almost as much as Roman Polanski would like to. And I just thought it was, I loved it, and it is horrible, and it's the having a baby. Well, two little girls. I couldn't help but think of like all the sort of middle class realities in this. So I think it's a real treat. It's a very grown up horror movie. I think I can't imagine a bunch of teenagers renting this like after a party and wanting to watch it. That just doesn't make any sense.
No, it's not like a Freddy Krueger.
Right. Unless they're a bunch of really nerdy teenagers, okay, and that would be great.
It's way different than even The Omen, which
that's right. The Omen, which we're going to do The Omen next, and that's a cheesy flick. Right, if I recall correctly. I actually don't remember really well.
No. Well, and both of these very much fit into that sort of satanic panic movie, block that lasted until like the early 80s, really.
Well, it picked up again, and part of what makes this what it is it's kind of the perfect time. With even down to the point where they show the Time magazine that says God is dead.
Yes,
it's really this. It's the reaction to all of that, which really hit the 60s, and then, but in the 80s, it was a straight up just devil scare. You're playing D&D, you're listening to heavy metal, you're probably, everybody's satanic.
Yeah, I wonder if we can twist our Evil Babies retrospective to somehow include Tom Hanks in Mazes and Monsters. I don't think so, but I think...
I just read that Mia Farrow actually plays the nanny for Damien in The Omen.
Yeah.
Really? Really?
That's awesome.
Okay, so all I know about the context of this movie is a little bit that I read in Zinnemann's Shock Value, but it's been a while. And, of course, I'm a big fanatic about the Gothic period, which comes right before Rosemary's Baby. But, Drew, give us a little bit on the background of how the heck this came together.
Well, William Castle, and if you're not hip to who William Castle is, William Castle, it was this great exploitation showman. He was a producer, director in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. And if any of you have seen the film Matinee, he is the John Goodman character is based on. And he was this very larger than life figure. He was a tall man, a big heavy set man with white hair, and he smoked big smelly cigars, and he was known for doing these sort of crass in your face horror films, like for their time period anyway, like House on Haunted Hill and The Tingler, and he would do things like having skeletons rise up out of the screen, or he put electric joy buzzers in the seats, and he was amazing. And he's actually one of my idols. If any of you have ever seen one of my my rock shows when I do my MC bit as Howlin' Drew Edwards, William Castle is actually one of the people I draw on for that sort of stage.
Howlin' Drew Edwards?
Howlin' Drew Edwards.
How have I not seen this?
He did 4D before 4D existed.
Right, that is exactly what we call 4D now. If you go to a 4D movie, it means that you're going to get shocks in your seats and blasts
like
of
water
air
sprayed on you and wind.
Exactly. And he was this godfather of exploitation cinema, and he had optioned the rights for the book. But the people who owned the film rights to the book were like, okay, you can produce this, but you can't direct it. And they had a certain amount of control, so there was this contention there.
Is that because they just thought that he wouldn't have the sensibility?
They thought he would
do
something that was. They thought that he would do something like House on Haunted Hill, and he probably would have.
Yeah.
And honestly, I kind of, as the William Castle aficionado that I am, I almost would, even though I don't think it would be as good of a movie, and I'm actually a much bigger William Castle fan than a Roman Polanski fan. But I kind of would like to see what his version would have been like, but there's no way it would have been as classy of a movie this ended up being. But
it seems unlikely, yeah.
His way of kind of getting back at them was like, well, I'm going to get this weird European director, and the only Hollywood movie he's ever really done is The Fearless Vampire Killers,
right,
which is this weird spoof of Hammer movies, and it ended up, working out greatly. And although he did kind of get his last laugh, because when they started promoting the movie, particularly in California, he actually hired members of the Church of Satan, particularly Anton LaVey, to promote the movie. So William Castle got, his little William Castle showmanship moment in the end after all. Which,
wait, I'm sorry, say that again? Cause did you say he is? Because it says in here that that was a false rumor, that it was Anton LaVey.
No,
did you say it was him?
It is the truth. He paid Anton LaVey to promote this movie.
Oh, to promote it. Because there was a rumor that he actually played the devil in the scene in the impregnation.
No.
But he was not. Yeah.
William Castle, though, does have a cameo in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, even I recognized William Castle in this movie. I think if you've seen William Castle, then you see him because he's so, it's a big cameo, but
well, he looks like a comic book character.
Yes. Well, I mean, one of my favorite movies since my friend, I name dropped Adam last week. And I'm going to do it again. Anyway, Adam Foshko, who we've got to have on as a guest sometime, is this writer of games. Anyway, he introduced me to Mr. Sardonicus, which is another William Castle thing. And Castle actually spends like 5 minutes on the screen, smoking a cigar and urging you to vote. Like in the middle of the movie, he says, okay, you get to vote on whether the bad guy will get punished miserably and terribly or get away. And you get to vote. And by the way, it was a complete fake. I mean, of course, there was no such thing as an actual, you couldn't actually push a button on your seat and cause any difference But his shtick is just wonderful. I love William Castle.
Well, even Alfred Hitchcock kind of borrowed when he got into doing Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Like he kind of borrowed a little bit, I feel, from the way
totally.
Castle promoted himself as a public figure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's a book called Shock Value that's all about the transition from the Gothic age into the modern age of horror movies, and they get into like the old school guys like Hitchcock and all those Hammer movies, which is where my heart lies really, and the transition into these sort of young Turks with their vision. So, all right. So there's a lot of themes here. I want to get into them, really quickly so that we can figure out the best stuff to discuss. But Rosemary's Baby involves a young couple who are in New York because the husband is an actor, and they get this wonderful apartment building. Wonderful apartment in this big apartment building. The apartments come open. It's being rented cheap by Elisha Cook, who we saw as the narrator in House on Haunted Hill.
And that's a real building. It's called the Dakota Building in Manhattan. On Manhattan.
I mean, it's gorgeous. It is so gorgeous. It's this old building. I know nothing about it. I don't know how old it is or whatever. But it's this beautiful building, and we don't know exactly. Can anybody tell me? Are they being singled out the moment they walk in? Because it's awfully convenient that this old lady has died and she's left roots. And what's the deal? Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure because, like, my general thought is that everybody who lives in the apartment is part of this satanic coven, but at the same time, it doesn't appear that the old lady was because she was trying to keep them out of her apartment.
That's right.
But
and she actually, that's right. She blocks off the door.
No, but I think she probably was associated with him at some point because she was doing all the herbs. Remember, she grows all the herbs for
that's true.
For the neighbor.
That's true.
So I think she was involved and then decided to not be involved anymore because there's that little Mia Farrow has a glimpse of writing where it says, "I no longer wish to be associated" or something like that.
Right.
And so it seems that she decided she wanted to cut off her ties with them, and that's when she mysteriously dies at the hospital. But as we know, the witches can cause people to die at hospitals, so that could be.
And what they discover right away is that this old lady who had this apartment before had blocked off a door with an enormous antique piece of furniture. When they move it out of the way, there's a door there into a closet. And what we discover along the way is that closet in the back of it has a hallway that leads you into the other apartment, because all of these apartments have been sliced up from what this used to be an enormous sort of great house or castle in New York. And consequently and this is so city, everybody has these weird giant apartments and the walls are paper thin. You can hear people arguing all the time. And
it's also got this weird history too.
Oh, yes. Well, and Mia Farrow has, as we meet this young couple, they're so charming, and Mia Farrow is, she's this gorgeous cosmopolitan girl, and it's so 60s. Her clothes are perfect, and John Cassavetes plays the husband, and he's this sort of ruggedly handsome, and we know he's an actor, and she's an honest-to-God housewife. There's never a single moment in this movie where you get the impression that she is thinking of going and getting a job, anything at all. She is happy to be a housewife, and they're in New York City, and they start out with a friend who tells them that this house is super famous in New York for having been the site of a lot of terrible things
it's kind of like people killing children, including their niece,
and eating them.
Witches eating babies and all kinds of stuff. Yes. So I'm skipping over these early points because they're really just setting up that they're a charming couple and they live in New York. We have no reason to suspect the husband is being creepy. He seems okay. It's a fairly traditional relationship. It blows me away. I mean, was anybody sort of taken or what did you think though about seeing this relationship as just like this is how middle class people were living in the late 60s? I mean,
I find myself wondering how an actor affords such a nice apartment.
Well, there's that. Yeah, this apartment seems to be about 1,200 square feet. It's enormous.
Well, he does say in the thing that we watched, the interviews thing. I think I almost think the scene wasn't actually in the movie. I think it was maybe cut from it. But the guy, or maybe what he did say, but the guy who's showing the apartment says, "We wish we could charge more." So it sounds like it's like rent controlled or something somehow.
Yeah. It does seem to be rent controlled, but I agree. I don't get how a guy who probably lives from audition to audition. I mean, through the middle of the movie, he's not suffering anymore. He's probably got a hit TV show, but so this place is a godsend. And since there's
a something send. I wouldn't necessarily say a god.
Maybe the Satan is just afraid. maybe the Satanists prayed that the devil would send them a young couple to be in his apartment.
Yep.
So weird stuff starts happening when we meet this young lady who in the laundry room. So Mia's like most housewives, is hanging out doing housewife stuff, and she meets this kind-ish young woman in the laundry room who says her name is it's Terry, right? And and they sort of hit it off. And Terry lives with this kindly old couple that they've heard next door. And the old couple is Ruth Gordon and an actor whose name I have forgotten, Sidney Blackmer. And they have this young lady living with them who, we learn really quickly in this scene that she's, they found her on the streets and they've been taking care of her and letting her live with them, and that's great, wonderful. Okay. Then the next thing we know, Terry has taken a header off of the building and has died. And that's the first moment when we meet Ruth Gordon and Sidney Blackmer.
And Terry has a thing that she wears around her neck that the people gave her that's really stinky, and it has something inside of it, some kind of herb or some well, at the time it's
tannish root.
Yeah, well, but she doesn't say at the time. She just says, I don't know what it is. But, yeah, it's tannish root, which it actually turns out to be more like a fungus. But she's wearing this, and then she says that they gave it to her and that it's supposed to be a good luck charm, and that up until they found her, she was like, kind of a druggie and not doing too well. And then they took her in and helped her out. So then she turns up dead, right?
She turns up dead, and so now immediately the next part of the film is that the death of Terry, which seems very sad, but they just met her, is the entree into their lives of this older couple who live next door. And
they don't seem to be that, like they're like, oh, that's terrible, but they're not that concerned.
No.
Oh, but just before she dies, actually, there is a scene where Rosemary and Guy hear the people next door chanting something.
Yes.
So, clearly this woman's death is hooked into this chanting business, but I actually am puzzled as to what it was supposed to be about because, what we've heard about the witches is that they use babies. I never did get an answer to my question.
I know what it's about. I know pretty well. Terry's going to be what Rosemary ends up being. I think that I don't know if they drive her to suicide because they've drawn a bead on Rosemary, or if she commits suicide because they're planning on using her the way as a mother of Satan, and she doesn't want to be a part of it. But either way, she's the first candidate, and then after she's dead, Rosemary becomes the next candidate. But yeah, other than the fact that we hear them through the wall going, then other than that, this couple are so batty and they're really charming. And again, this is the stuff where a bunch of high school students, I'm sure they'd be like, dude, why are we watching this movie? Because Ruth Gordon is playing this insanely, I can really believe being a young couple with this nosy old, 70 or 80, well, actually this 80-something couple living next door who are insisting that they come in, insisting that they bring you some flowers or bring you some groceries or have you over for dinner and blah, blah, blah. And it's wonderful. And these are the points where the movie is really just playing with what life is like, what it's like to be a young married. Go ahead, Tony.
She's very New York.
Yes.
You don't have to go that far to meet, she's definitely, it's a stereotype. They exist for a reason. She's actually, you don't have to go very far to meet her character in real life.
Oh, God, Ruth Gordon. Well, you'd seen her probably in, what's the one where she has Harold and Maude.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was several years later. So Harold and Maude was 71. But, in that, so she plays a Holocaust survivor who has a love affair with this high school student who is suicidal. And in this movie, she's just this batty old lady, but it's so funny even when she's revealed slowly, and it's no spoiler to say that these old people who seem to Mia to merely be sort of fuddy-duddy and staid and old and nosy, but not evil in the traditional sense, they're Satanists. And Ruth Gordon is the best because she's so matter-of-fact about her Satanism. Her Satanism is a very functional one that, it has, don't worry, as long as she eats the mouse, she'll be out. And it's got, and she just knows all these rules about how the Satanism works.
But she's playing like a complete, New Yorker old lady stereotype, but she's playing it like a symphony orchestra. She's so good.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Both of these old people. I mean, I love. I can't remember the husband's name again, but they could have had somebody like Charles Gray in The Devil.
It's Sidney
you mean
Poitier.
the character is actually called Roman, just like Roman Polanski, and his last name is. Or the last name is Castevet, which is just like John Cassavetes. So it's kind of funny. I think that they grabbed these names. I think they're probably.
Those are the names in the book.
Huh?
For what it's worth, those are the names in the book.
Really? Roman is his name? How funny. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But it's better that he's not like this more traditionally sinister, like Vincent Price type, because it's actually more frightening when he actually starts to get. Well, because again, you have that element of the mundane, and when you start to see like the elements of the cult leader starting to creep into his performance, it's more shocking because it's subtle. If he had been like Vincent Price or something like that, it would have been a little more obvious.
I think Roman is a wonderful character, and the actor is brilliant because he just feels so warm and inviting and fun. Like even at the very end, and I know I'm skipping to it, but at the very end when he's convincing Rosemary to just be a mother to his wife. What's his wife's name? I forget the.
Minnie.
Yeah, Minnie.
Minnie.
Minnie and the other ladies, they're too old. It's just not right. And he kind of just shakes his hand, and it's just he's so such a warm grandpa. I mean, I just love.
And he's so convincing.
You can totally see. It's almost like a hypnotic quality that he has. Because I was saying to Jason, I'm like, do you believe that that guy would have been convinced to get in on this plot within 2 meetings? And I'm thinking it's just because this guy is so persuasive and so gentle that's the only way. Because
Tony, you were going to say something.
Well, the thing is, having been through the devil scare and constantly be accused since I listened to metal and, play D&D and everything that you could possibly do that was so bad during that really, everything's the devil kind of time. When you actually read about the people who are truly Satanists, who, no matter what part of Satanism, because, there's Anton LaVey, there's a bunch of different, depending on, where you fit into the whole thing. Are you theist? Are you not? The people who are really into it, and especially the people who, had connections, the people who are at the top, have connections. They are very affluent. Mm-hmm. The scary people, the people that you don't know, the ones that aren't, throwing up the horns at a concert. That's
right.
What's real. That's
but what's funny
behind it, and so his character is very much, like I said, if you read about it, very believable is that he's a world traveler. He knows this stuff. You can tell that, he's very worldly.
Yes.
Well, it's like the KKK. I mean, the KKK is the same way. Those guys were they were the movers and the shakers, because this coven is made up of one of the foremost obstetricians in the city,
Yes.
in there. There's a famous dentist. There's a bunch of these famous and rich and whatever people. So it's very similar to how the KKK works.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the thing that I love about it is that there is this undercurrent of the occult and the supernatural, but it's portrayed in this very day to day. And it's even if you are this practitioner of black magic, eventually you're going to be this old doddering man.
And he's spilling drinks, you know, and his wife is picking up after him, and he repeats himself a little bit more than you might expect. You know, and I don't even know how much of this is a part that he's playing. You know, when he's sitting there and he says like the same thing about being a world traveler, like in a row, you totally believe it, and you can just see Mia Farrow rolling her eyes like, oh my God, how much time are we seriously going to be sucked into spending with these guys? And I don't know if it's a part that he's playing where he's kind of a doddering old man, or he's partly becoming a doddering old man. I think both those things are true, actually.
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, it's also, you know, who's going to suspect a doddering, you know, who's going to suspect this guy who spills drinks and stuff? But I think it's definitely a part he's affected, you know. And, you know, it's also interesting. I mean, of course, that is how he charms, you know, people.
Yeah.
And it's really effective.
I love that.
His part, I think, is really one of the best and kind of, you know, most understated. That when you really see it, he's definitely in charge, or he's in the super inner circle, and that's, you know, how he's kept this awesome apartment and how he convinces people and gets his way. And it's pretty impressive and scary, because in the real world, that's how things work, right? Like, no matter what it is, it doesn't have to be Satanism, but a lot of the things that maybe, you know, like, wow, that's not cool. The corruption, the everything is really by, you know, a lot of times by these old guys who have been running the show for quite a while.
So there's a dichotomy that I want to ask about. You mentioned old guys, and I think this is important. We've now set up all the characters here. They're in this apartment, and I see two dichotomies at the same time. And one is, I mean, there's several others, but two that are related are old religion versus modern agnosticism, which these two young couples are about. And you know, versus Catholics, which Mia used to be, and Satanists, which the old people are. So there's old religion versus the new moderns, and then there's also just old people versus the young people, right. and how those are related. I mean, I remember I was watching this, and I really felt like there's a point where they've taken over her life. You know, they're telling her everything about, you know, they've picked her freaking doctor for her, you know, and she just says, I'm going to have a party. We're going to have some people who are under 40.
and she goes to Vidal Sassoon to get her haircut.
Yes.
You know, to get her little pixie cut, which, by the way, Vidal Sassoon actually did do the cut. He did himself.
I went to Vidal Sassoon. That's right. You know, yeah, everybody she's been talking to all gets killed by the Satanists, so her only response is to, like, have a party with all of her young friends. You know, what do you guys have any thoughts on what the movie might be trying to say as far as like, you know, old religions versus what these characters are?
Well, actually, now that you mention it, and I glossed over it, I remember writing notes for it last night, but that these are very much actually, in this film, I think that's probably in the novel, they're very much theistic Satanists. So they're, you know, it's important that it's someone that they corrupt who used to be Catholic.
Yes.
That's part of their criteria. Whereas, like, you know, Church of Satan, Anton LaVey Satanism isn't the opposite of God, right?
Right.
And so, but in this, you know, whether it's because it makes a better theme or because it's, you know, what they've chosen to, you know, it stands out more that, you know, these are theistic Satanists, and so, you know, when they mention God, they're like, you know.
Sure, they're the loyal opposition.
It does have something, you know, that does play into it, this kind of older.
That's something that we talked about before.
Oh, wait, Joya, you're crackling a little bit. Is there anything? Go ahead, try again. I think we may have lost her.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. Well, she'll be back in a sec. I was, oh my gosh, I lost it because Joya sounded like she was disappearing around the dark side of the moon. I feel terrible. Okay, yes, about we set up Mia as being, Mia's character as being clearly formerly Catholic, and she's left that behind. But yeah, I think to some extent, in the course of this thing, since she gets brought back into being a Catholic, into being a Satanist, you can almost think of it as being brought into a team in some sort of professional ball association where, you gave up in your religion, but look, we need somebody to be the mother of Satan, and you can play an important part in that, and that's just as important to our cosmology as being an important place in the Catholic organization. So it's rebellion, but it's still part of this worldview where there's God and the devil. Huh?
No matter what you believe, a lot of people always associate it with, Masonic things because they have rituals and stuff.
Right.
I'm back, but for some reason I lost my connection. I don't know why. But I was going to say, but basically I think you guys are saying, which is that Catholicism and Satanism have in common, that they have all that ritualistic kind of stuff, and that there's really just deep roots to it, and all the history. And she even says during the impregnation scene, she sees. I don't know if it's a bishop or it's supposed to be the Pope, but anyway, she says, forgive me, Father, and he's like, okay, and kiss my ring.
Yes, he's okay,
but
and she's mixing the two.
The funny thing is like he sort of poo-poos on the ritualistic nature of Catholicism when they're having their dinner party, and he is, almost like a lot of young people I run across in Austin, that he's very dismissive of religion, and it's sort of like, oh, well, that's too quaint to believe in that kind of thing. We're too sophisticated and cosmopolitan to think that way, which is, does position him as this sort of anti-establishment figure, but then at the end, we do learn that, he's not anti-establishment at all. He's just another group.
He's part of organized religion.
Yeah, here is the old boss, same as the new boss.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, all right. Another dichotomy that I wanted Julia to talk about, well, especially now that she's back. All right. Because Stephen King doesn't get into this in Dance Macabre. Julia, I was really curious what your thought was looking at this image of having a baby, having an obstetrician in the late 1960s in the middle class, and how does that relate to the doctor turns out to be satanic? Doesn't matter, and also if you could explain Rosemary's Baby vis-a-vis the women's movement and men versus women, that would be good too.
How many hours do I get to talk about this? That's funny. Okay, well, first of all, I will say that I know that the evolution of childbirth has been dramatic in the last 30, 40 years, as far as, as you know, men even being in the delivery room for that matter. But and our parents, our mothers, a lot of them were just knocked out and they had the baby that way. It wasn't even a matter of cesarean. It was just traditionally that's what you did. You just got knocked out, and then they just got baby out. They didn't necessarily go in as like a cesarean, but they cut, And it's not, it's just really different. And so there was very much of an idea of the male obstetrician taking care of the woman. The woman didn't know anything. She didn't need to know anything. She didn't need to be informing herself. But the sad part is, in my personal experience, there are still a lot of doctors now who still feel like you should not inform yourself about your body because you're just going to screw yourself up. You're going to get confused. I was actually told that by a nurse that I didn't need to be taking my temperature because I was just going to get confused because she didn't know who I was. And that was just the line. I was like, don't be, because I called to ask why my temperature was all over the place, and she was like, you don't need to be taking your temperature. And I was like, what? That's ridiculous. I actually had diagnosed myself with hypothyroidism, and I wanted to know if my thyroid had been tested, and she was like, no, don't be tested. And I'm like, has my thyroid been tested or not? And she's like, well, no. So I go and get it tested, and of course I had thyroidism. And but the thing is, she doesn't know that I'm an attorney. She doesn't know I know how to do research. So their line that they give everyone is, I'm not saying that by a long shot that this is everyone, but there are still medical professionals and other professionals out there who think people get on the internet and they think they're experts because they look at something and then they come in and they have these ideas, and it just makes my job more difficult. You just need to not read and don't worry about anything and let me take care of it because I'm the expert. And I get where they're coming from, but telling somebody not to be informed about their own body and what they should expect is ridiculous.
And that's apparently not just an internet thing. That actually happens here.
Yeah, well, it happens here with the books. He's like, don't be reading the book. And I imagine there were plenty of doctors like that who were like, I am the expert. I will tell you what you need to know. If I didn't tell you, you don't need to know it. So I think that part is probably right on without absent the satanic part of it. I think the satanic part of it just figures into the whole weird, like the herbal thing, like the drink that she's giving you, which I'm kind of confused as to why they treat her pregnancy the way that they do. I mean, why is this devil baby need special herbs or special drinks?
I think that I always get the impression that since it is a very abnormal thing, right? Like there could be all kinds of problems, and so they're hedging their bets and they're making sure it gets, the herbs that would best be good for a child of Satan, etc. In the same way your doctor might give you certain vitamins, whatever. And
it's not a normal pregnancy. I mean, she starts losing weight, and she also starts eating raw meat.
Yeah.
I mean,
and having pain, sharp pain. Mm-hmm.
I like also that the way the way that they insert themselves into this couple's lives, because she meets her at the door and hands her, and it's by rote. She takes the drink, she eats the thing.
Yeah.
She's not even aware that look, she's over here. I need to do this, even when she doesn't want to. Like it's like a reminder. She's programmed now to do this.
Right, and I find that totally believable. That anything that you repeat often enough, even in a high-rise apartment building, can become quite normal to you, even if you're beginning to doubt the whole thing. I mean, so yeah, they're giving her these stupid smooth. Look, I've worked with programmers at Maxis who had a smoothie every day at like 11 that was the most foul-smelling green gloppy thing. I cannot imagine that such a smoothie would actually be good for a human, and yet people do, drink these things, and so doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, the problem is it's scary when you don't know what's in it, I think. But I say this, and I drink shakes that I don't really know what's in them.
I don't think you could do this. I mean, I guess they could remake this movie, but I don't think it would be honestly the fact that this movie was made in the 60s and it still is such a male-dominant society makes it more frightening, because the more it goes on, the more she's cut off, because she really doesn't have a support network. If it was present day and she was a little bit more of an independent, had a job,
well, in your heart kind of
I disagree. I think there are still, and I know personally, I think there are still plenty of women who are cut off like that because they have. I mean, again, we've talked about this before. If you just imagine an abusive husband as opposed to this, because this guy's not abusive, he's just he's nothing. She could have, if she were a stronger woman, she could have gotten away from him, no problem. But the thing is, she doesn't see him as a threat. But let's say in the modern day movie, if you were going to remake it, you would want the guy to be a little bit more kind of scary and abusive, so that she's afraid to leave and afraid to do anything that he didn't want her to do, because she's afraid he'll kill her or hurt her, or these neighbors, same thing. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like once you introduce fear into it, then it doesn't really matter how independent the woman is, because now she's just threatened, and especially if she's pregnant, she's fearing for her baby. She's trying to figure out, survival. I mean, but that part's really scary. The fact that she, especially when she goes to a doctor, she thinks she's going to be able to trust him, because she goes to Charles Grodin's character, the original doctor that she had, and he says, just take a nap and I'll take care of you. And then he calls Dr. Saperstein, the satanic doctor, and her husband to come get her, and they grab her by the arm and pull her out the door and tell her, if you don't come with us, and you keep talking about witchcraft, we're going to turn you into the psych hospital or whatever. And that would still happen. I mean, if you were saying all this stuff, somebody's doing all this kind of stuff to you, and you tell other people, you will be accused of being crazy, and you will be locked up just the same. So I think that kind of stuff can still happen.
Yeah, yeah.
It's heartbreaking. That
Yeah.
part is heartbreaking. Like,
And it
every
turns
time
out-
I've seen this movie.
Yeah, and it's true. We know it's true because we're watching it, and that's part of where the funny satire is going. Satire is maybe the wrong word, but this mixture of reality and fantasy in this movie where, you know, people will feel like this. They feel trapped, they feel paranoid, but in this case, they are trapped and they're paranoid, but it's real. The people really are plotting against them. They're giving them things that are bad to drink when they're saying that it's good. And, you know, which is very to me, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, how Buffy the Vampire Slayer is about high school, really, you know, but where the person that the girl sleeps with her first time turns out to be not such a good guy, but in the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that translates into he turns out to be a monster, you know, and yeah, he becomes a worse monster version of himself, you know, instantly. So, and this is working a lot like that, where paranoia becomes a supernatural version of the paranoia. But I think one of the most thrilling moments to me is before that, when the girls get together with Mia Farrow and kick John Cassavetes the hell out of the kitchen so that he, you know, so that they can talk to her and say, you need to go back to your own obstetrician because this is really crazy. And you realize how isolated she is, you know, how she doesn't have.
Pain. It's not all
Yeah.
to be in pain.
And some of
Right.
that goes back to, you know, I think in a lot of ways, I'm kind of glad that William Castle didn't make this movie because I think there's a lot of subtlety that he probably wouldn't have brought to it. It would have been.
Oh, it would have been incredibly bombastic if William Castle would have done it. Like, his style's completely different.
There's great, like, you know, when they have her in the back at the apartment, and her husband's always in shadow, and he's propped up against the, you know, in the doorway, looking very contrite and very helpless. Even though he's kind of a jerk in a lot of, like, once he gets a taste of being a famous actor, you know, he's kind of like, don't ruin this for us, right? Because
don't ruin this for me, I think he says.
Well, yeah.
Let's back up a little. Let's back up a little for those who haven't seen it or don't remember, to say that what happens is they get to know the neighbors next door, and the husband Guy is immediately like intrigued and interested in getting to know them better. And so he starts going over there, and immediately suddenly he wants to have a baby. He's like, let's have a baby. And they arrange this, you know, this demonic impregnation thing. Anyway, so it's clear, and then he's immediately getting better jobs, and in fact, somebody that was supposed to have gotten a part goes blind, and so he gets the part now. So it's clear that he's made a deal with the devil. He's made a deal with this group that they're gonna that he's gonna let them have her basically for this baby making purpose, and in exchange they'll make him a famous actor.
Well, he doesn't know it when the first guy goes blind, but I think it becomes very clear after they've kind of hooked him in.
Yeah.
No, I think that was the blindness thing was part of the deal already.
Yeah.
He doesn't know the first time because he's like, oh, wow, that's terrible. I hate to do this. And
he's faking. He's not even faking. He's acting.
Well, he's feeling guilt. He's feeling a little guilty, but at the same time, he's like, "Well, this is what I signed up for."
He does show guilt from time to time, but he's a putz.
Here's the way I got it. That happens so quickly after, but it's part to me, and you know, evidently you guys disagree with me, but that happens almost immediately after their dinner party. If I remember correctly.
It's a good point.
Do you think it's part of the seduction? Like, you think they're saying, look what we did for you as a gift?
Definitely. And then he ends up going over there like, hey, you know, I did this. And he keeps going over there independently of them. And I think that's where they're like, hey, by the way.
No. You know why, Tony? I think that's wrong. Because remember, when she talks to who ends up being Tony Curtis, actually. Tony Curtis is the voice of that actor when she calls him later. He says that she goes, my Guy has something of yours. He's like, oh, you mean my tie? Yeah, we switched ties. So Guy was already over there with him with the intention of getting something personal of his to give to the witch people so that they would do the spell.
Wow, that's right.
Maybe it started as coincidence, or they were like, hey, do this. And then, I think he's not immediate. Like, there's because the way it is, because nobody's going to believe like, hey, by the way, we're Satanists. Go get this guy's tie.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Well, maybe they did that as a way of like, hey, we'll prove this to you. Like, we can do this for you.
Go get a personal thing.
Yeah, we'll prove to you our power. You know, but I mean, there's obviously a lot about like what's going on behind the scenes because it's almost entirely through Rosemary's point of view, which is for the better. But there's a lot of the stuff you have to kind of, you know, figure out in your own head, like we're doing right now, sort of hashing it out between us, because there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff.
Tell me about the impregnation scene. My only thing about this, because I don't want to describe it fully. If anybody wants to take a crack at it, or I will, but it definitely needs to be described. But what I'll say is it definitely reminded me of Roger Vaden's Blood and Roses, which has a surrealist scene a lot like this. But does anybody want to take a crack at bulleting out the crazy crap that Rosemary sees when she's...
I don't know if I can do it justice. It's dreamlike by way of, like, it starts out very dreamlike and then turns very nightmarish.
Well, it starts out like a trip, like an acid trip, because she's actually been drugged.
Right.
And all the things are like things that people experience. You know, if they've been put under, hey, look, I'm floating. Oh, look, hey, the mattress is on water. And then, hey, look, now there's Satan. You know.
And she's on a yacht with President Kennedy. And President Kennedy won't let her friend come on the boat because he's not a Catholic, because it's for Catholics only. And then there's, and then
also
she's
in very 60s. Like,
and then they're like painting rune symbols all over Mia Farrow's body,
with blood.
And then John Cassavetes in blood, yes. And then John Cassavetes is climbing in bed with her, but then it's not John Cassavetes; it's a scaly demon devil, which I find fascinating. I find fascinating that it's like it's like really like a Jack Chick tract kind of real, honest to God devil.
Well, that's the kind that the original guy was going to summon anyway. I mean, it had been purported, right?
Tell me more about this.
Father, Marco, or the guy who they drug out, you know, went into the street and people attacked him.
Right.
Roman's dad. They beat him to death because he conjured up the devil.
Yeah, Mercado.
Right. Yeah, Mercado. Damien Mercado, isn't it?
Huh?
Yes, it is an anagram. The name is an anagram.
Well, Stephen, his name is an anagram for Stephen Mercado or something like that. Or Steve Mercado.
Yeah.
But
the dad is Damien Mercado, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Well remembered.
Wasn't it that they almost killed him? Like he had still survived after this.
It's something like that.
And then, but supposedly that's what, you know. This demon, it may live in another world. It may be exactly who he summoned, who comes around when they need him. You know. But even at the end when they're at the party, you see, you know, her husband is also, you know, he's slunk into the background.
Yeah.
They kept him around because he's important enough, but they know, they're like, you're not the dad. And he's been totally
emasculated. I mean, he's completely, you know, he's got his, he says to her something really stupid and selfish, like, craven, like, don't mess this up for me. But he's totally embarrassed about the role he's played. He totally, you know, he's disempowered.
Yeah, he can't look her in the eye.
Well, he's the devil's cuckold, you know.
Right, exactly. And so I think that's amazing. I mean, those are all such fantastic choices. You know, they find a lot of good business for him. Even
apparently,
they
wanted Robert Redford for that role, and I'm thinking it would have been such a different movie if Robert Redford had played that role.
Can you imagine Robert Redford?
Robert Redford is almost too charming, I think. Like this guy's kind of got like a douchebaggy kind of almost Dean Martin kind of vibe to him. Like you know, he seems very much like a guy made up of leftover Rat Pack parts, and it works.
I can see what you're saying, and yeah, there is kind of a sweaty sort of you know, I don't know, Hollywoodishness about him that.
Well, he wants to be Hollywood. I mean, he's New York, but he wants to be Hollywood. He kind of makes we're going to play
true.
Whatever. But also, you know, I think it's better that it's cast the way it is because he does have that I'm working, I've been in some TV kind of thing. He's not already this.
Well, that's a good point.
Guy that
there's the fact that he's Italian. There's an ethnic sense to him. There's like a struggle, so you can see kind of, whereas Redford being the perfect wasp, dangling riches in front of Robert Redford might seem less of a stretch. Redford, who looks like a model, by the way, whereas this guy's handsome, but so it'd be interesting to I can see this is a farther fall for John Cassavetes because he has more to grasp for. And
I also just don't. I also just like I can't. And maybe it's just I'm predisposed to what I think of Robert Redford being like. I just don't think like the points where you are supposed to kind of boo and hiss this guy. I don't think Robert Redford would have been able to quite pull that off because there's an inherent likability to Robert Redford.
By the way, Darren points out, our audience member points out that Redford did play the devil in the Twilight Zone, but he was a seductive devil.
He was
deaf. He wasn't the devil.
I'm sorry. Deaf. Yes. Yes.
Isn't he also though the one who does Indecent Proposal? Like he's actually involved on the other side of making the deal.
In an Indecent Proposal, he's essentially Mephistopheles.
That's not a very good movie. Like whereas this, I don't know. That's a whole other subject we could get into.
Yeah. I don't know. Though. I think Robert Redford's a good enough actor that he could have pulled it off, and he certainly would have made more. He would have made it more interesting. I feel because I mean, not that it needs to be more interesting, but I just think
funny.
John Cassavetes. I don't see why she would be in love with him really. Like, I mean, even the scene when they are gonna make love in the house, like right after they move in, it's just so unromantic. But I know that's direction because there's no music, there's no. They just take off their own clothes and they just get the. And it's like it's not. There's nothing romantic about it. So
right. That's Polanski showing us like. Cinema verite. These are the humans in their natural habitat, and
but I think it would have been a more dramatic change because with Robert Redford. Because with Robert Redford, you would feel like, oh, she's so in love with him, and they're so in love with each other, and then it would be like you would just see the coldness kind of come over. I think, whereas this guy kind of felt cold from the get-go, but maybe that was intentional. I don't know.
It's hard to say. I like John Cassavetes a lot, but that would have been interesting. I mean, likewise,
do you think he's actually in love with Rosemary, or do you think he's just this opportunist?
I think she's a perfect wife. I think she's a trophy wife.
But do you think he loves Rosemary?
That's what I mean. I think he loves her as much as he can love her. I think this is me. Look, you never want to necessarily analyze the two-dimensional people, but I think that he's so self-centered that it doesn't really matter. I think he has a beautiful wife. She's going to stay at home. They're going to, she's going to do whatever it is that housewives do all day. And that's his life, and I think he's so self-centered that it wouldn't matter. I mean, when she's having a hard time and losing weight and wants to change obstetricians, he's like, "Hey, don't mess this up for me." I just can't get away.
He doesn't care that she's in pain. He doesn't care about any of that, right?
I think again, I think that's why it works, and I think that like you believe it, like you believe he's an opportunist. The whether or not it's romantic, like for better or worse, you move into a house. And you're there, and you don't have your stereo set up. That's to me more real. Like that's not movie romantic, but it's definitely like the.
No, it is. That's true. That's
like I mean, hey, we don't have a. What do we hear? Oh, we hear what's beside us in the apartment. It's certainly, yes, it's not.
You're right. There's something really romantic about the early days.
Real. Yeah. And he's very real. He's also, he's kind of a little bit of a jerk at the beginning, but and that's why I think, Drew, I think he loves her in the way that, he's a New York actor who wants to make it, and maybe she'll have to help support him, maybe she won't, but he's doing, good enough that they're stepping up, that kind of thing. And all of that feels pretty, I don't know, it really worked for me. So.
It's interesting to note, by the way, as a side note, that Mia Farrow was married to Frank Sinatra, and that while she was making this film, apparently she had intended to go back and be with him, but apparently, like they showed her the galleys or whatever. I don't remember exactly. No, I guess it was the dailies. They showed the dailies and said, "This is really good. It's going really well." you should stay because I think you could win an Academy Award for this. So she stays, and Frank Sinatra sends her divorce papers while they're on making this movie. So it's really interesting that she's got that whole storyline going on with John Cassavetes, and they're growing apart and having weird stuff going on, and then at the same time in real life.
And there's also that ethnic cross with there, because John Cassavetes being Italian and Mia Farrow being this really brittle wasp, you know, and she's married to somebody just like him. She's married to Frank Sinatra.
In a lot of ways,
Probably one of the most famous Italian performers in America. I mean, because look who she was against right before this. She was on TV. She was super famous in America because she was on Peyton Place, and she starred against Ryan O'Neal. And there was never ever a more white bread actor than Ryan O'Neal. And then
later on, she goes on to Woody.
Woody Allen.
Woody Allen. You know, by the way, as another side note, she was actually the mom. Miss Farrow is the mother of one of my law school classmates, and she was at my law school graduation. I told my mom, I'm like, hey, look out for Mia Farrow because her son's in my class, and sure enough, like she walked by, and my mom's like, Mia. She turns around and she's like, yes, and my mom's like, oh, I just want to say hi. But anyway, random trivia.
I've done that. It can't be helped. You see somebody and you're like, hello, and they're like, yes, and like, I don't know. I admire your work. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jason got to do that with Bill Gates. Oh, I've worked with some people at
He's like, company. I'm sure I care. Yes.
Anyway.
I did that to Garrison Keillor as well.
Yeah.
So it goes. All right. Yeah, okay. I want to get to the end because next to that amazing dream sequence, and by the way, if you haven't seen it, you got to see Blood and Roses as well, because Blood and Roses has this killer dream sequence at the end that just will blow your mind. So if you like the dream sequence here, it's very similar to that. But and that's a vampire movie, so I totally and it's one of the best, like, Carmilla vampire movies ever. Blood and Roses by Roger Vadim from 1960. But okay, all of this stuff happens. Let's get to the end. We've basically, she tries to get away. She tries to go to her original obstetrician, which is Charles Grodin, and he hands her right back to all the men in her life, and who bring her back to the old ladies, and then it's baby time. The baby comes, and then what, Julia? They tell her, they say the baby's dead.
Well, no. First they say the baby is boy, he's fine. So she goes back to sleep, and then she wakes up, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, the baby died." Which, of course, she should have seen coming because she knew that the whole point was that they were going to use. She assumes that they're going to use her baby for a sacrifice. It never occurs to her in a million years.
That's right.
The baby's going to be, Satan's offspring. So she's thinking this whole time that her baby's going to be used. So when they tell her the baby's dead, I mean, she's actually not as upset as she should be, given that she thought all along that they were going to sacrifice it. But I mean, she's not angry. She just seems like she's like, well,
she's pretty doped up, though.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's true. She's really doped up. So she starts saying, what do they call it when you don't take the pill that somebody gives you? There's an expression and a word for it, like palming it or something. I don't know. But anyway, she's not.
I have no idea.
She's not taking. She doesn't. They give her the pill, but she doesn't take them. And she's just saving them. And then she's getting her wits about her basically, and she's hearing a baby crying. And they're also expressing her milk. And she's like, well, what's this for? And I guess they're telling her probably that it's just to relieve the pressure. But what do you do with milk? Why don't you throw it out? But then she's really upset when the friend is really upset when the friend of the neighbor is really upset whenever she kind of contaminates the milk a little bit. She's like, no, don't do that. So she definitely feels like, okay, that the baby's still alive. And so she's going to go to that closet where she knows that that had been blocked off before, where she thinks that's how they're getting in and out of the apartment, and go find out what's going on. So she grabs a big knife and makes her way into the apartment next door, where there is a big party going on around this black cradle with the black canopy on it. And her husband is there, and the obstetrician shows up, and of course the neighbors and all their friends. And she walks in, and like the one lady screams, you know, but everyone else kind of looks like startled at her. But then, like I said, Roman, who is such a smooth guy, immediately just takes it in stride. He's holding his giant knife, and he comes up and he says, you know, hey, how's it going, basically? Like, you know, what's up? You know, here's your baby.
We were hoping you'd show up. It's almost like,
exactly.
eventually.
By the way, your baby's the antichrist.
It's like, no, that's not how it goes, though. He says, you know, oh, good, you know, it's good that you're here, whatever. So she goes and looks, and she's like, what have you done to it? She goes, what have you done to its eyes? And then that Roman guy says, he has his father's eyes. And she's like, what are you talking about? Guys' eyes are normal.
You've been waiting your life to do these lines.
I know. I love that scene. And then they're like, no, guy is not his father. Satan is his father. And then they all start freaking out. Hail, Satan. Hail. They're calling him Adrian? Is that Adrian? Yeah. Adrian. Hail, Satan. He's going to be like, you know, whatever. I don't remember the line, but it's like about how he's going to. I wish I knew the line. It's probably quoted somewhere because it's just such a great line that Roman has about the future of this child and how important he is to the future of the world.
Right.
And then she's kind of like a little freaked out. You know? But then, like I said, Roman's like, you know, you're his mom, be his mom, and
and like we talked about,
think about it.
Because she comes from Catholicism, there's plenty of room in her head for fulfilling a role. I mean, in a sense, for a hardcore Catholic, fulfilling a role in the Satanic Church as like a really important enemy is almost a role. I mean, it's almost like being the Pope or being a Mother Superior or something important. You just happen to be fulfilling this other role. You know, in other words, to me, it makes a crazy kind of sense for her that she would fulfill that part. It'd be like leaving DC to go be the editor-in-chief at Marvel, you know?
I wonder, though, the thing I wonder, because it does it has a slightly ambiguous ending, but she's definitely rock. You know, I guess it's not ambiguous at all, because she starts rocking the cradle. But if this, you know, the question I ask myself is, like, if this was my kid, you know, obviously I'm a guy, so I can't be completely in this situation, but if, you know, I somehow found out that I had this monster child, would I be thinking, okay, if I raise this kid right, it's not going to turn out evil, or is she just sort of like, okay, my baby's going to be, you know, my baby's going to destroy the world no matter what I do, or is she thinking in her head, I can turn this around, I can teach this kid the right things, and no matter who his father is, maybe somehow I can teach this kid to be good. I wonder what's going through. She might be thinking that,
or she might even start to think, wow, he's going to be really important, who cares why? You know? I don't get the sense
that Rosemary's I don't get the sense that Rosemary's like that, because she's honestly disgusted with you know, with Guy and with most of these people. You know, she you know, she has a knife, for God's sakes. Like I don't, and she seems to be, you know, like, okay, yeah, she's a little frail, but she seems to be a good person. You know,
she does seem like a good person. That's absolutely right.
But think about this, though. There is not a mother alive who doesn't think differently about her child than she does about anybody else in the world. You know what I mean? Like, we all are going to go, my child is more important than anybody else. And so it's very possible that even though she thinks that the Satanism is horrible, that the idea that this child is special could be appealing to her. You know what I mean? Just by him being special.
Well, no matter what, that kid's not going to be normal.
Right.
Like there's, but like,
right, there are
I'm
these
just
physical
wondering if she somehow thinks
around.
she can. Yeah, does she think she can redeem him? And that's
interesting.
That's me, and maybe that's me throwing in my Protestant background into the mix, but that's what's going through my head in that last
I have no idea. It's a really good question. You know, does she think I'm going to make it with this, you know, in this life with this kid the same way that anybody makes it through life with a kid with challenges? Or is it, I'm going to take the kid and me and the kid are going to not be, it's going to be like Hellboy, remember Hellboy is supposed to be a demon bringing about the Armageddon, but instead
Hellboy is effectively the Rosemary's Baby reinvented as a superhero in a lot of respects.
Absolutely. What do we see? What happens to Rosemary's Baby? Well, he gets adopted by a secret government organization and fights Nazis. That's so that could. And by the way, I should mention, and Darren brought it up. Ira Levin wrote a sequel. There is a sequel with Patty Duke from the TV. Just forget it. I haven't seen it. I'm sure it's awful. Maybe we should see it and talk about it, but not right now. There is that. But Ira Levin wrote a novel sequel to this called Son of Rosemary, and I have not read it. But I'm sure it's good. I love Ira Levin, and I'd love to see what he actually does, with the character. So. All right. I know that we've been going on for a long time, so we should probably go to our final thoughts and also to endorsements for the week. So where do we go? What was the order? Oh, let's mix it up. Drew, are you ready to give us your final thoughts and what people should take away with Rosemary's Baby?
Yes, sir. This is obviously a very, very important horror film. Influential. It's also kind of when you see where movies started to go into the 70s and onward into the 80s, with this sort of more naturalistic look to them. This movie is definitely a part of that. But at a larger, if you find yourself like me, you're wondering on a day-to-day level about like the nature of good and evil and how it is in just sort of our day-to-day and mundane life. I think this is a good movie to meditate on those themes with. And whether or not you're religious in the slightest, or if you're philosophical, spiritual, whatever, I think that is something you can take from this movie.
Very cool. Tony, final thoughts, Rosemary's Baby?
Yeah, I think it's, again, like we said before, it's definitely something. I think it's a movie if you like much more kind of like, if you're into more slasher films, or I remember also with Drew that I watched it, when I was younger, and it wasn't as effective. It's definitely it's a slow burn, but there's really great parts, like the parts, regardless of the fact that it could have ended up not even having a true Satan baby at the end. The parts of the aspects of how people get mixed up in cults and all of this stuff and power and all of that, that all still works regardless. And I think a lot of that does, brilliant work from Polanski and cinematographers and everything like that. And I also have to add at the very end, where everything plays out, it's also very much like Lovecraft influenced. How that played out in the book, I haven't read the book, but it's perfect. The Dunwich Horror, does pretty much the same thing, or very similar. And that Lovecraftian, like, oh, and by the way, here's this, and we're all part, and don't you want to be part of it? Like it,
right.
Is fairly brilliant. I really like the movie. I think it's not as scary as you might think it's going to be, especially if you see the cover and the poster, which is pretty ominous.
Yes,
but,
and that's a beautiful poster, and it feels so.
Well, it has one of the best taglines, I think, in horror movie history too.
Which is what?
Pray for Rosemary's Baby.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very ambiguous yet very creepy.
Yeah, it's like yeah. Wow.
I really, it works. It works better, I think, as an adult. Not to say that if your tastes are mature, but I think it's definitely slow. It's not going to be for everyone, but it does what it does really well.
Mhm. No, it's beautiful. All right, Julia, final thoughts, Rosemary's Baby.
Well, I'm like Drew. I grew up Catholic, so for me, like, the devil has always been a big character, in my life. And even to the point that I'm so superstitious about the number 666, which, by the way, is the birth date of the baby, June 66. And I've always been so superstitious about that if I see that number somewhere, like if it's the amount that I have to pay for something, I'll buy an extra thing just so I don't have to pay that amount. It's like, I don't want that number. So to me, that's just, it's chilling anytime that there's any kind of satanic anything involved with something. So I think it's a neat theme, and it's very well done. I'm glad that Roman Polanski directed it. I think it was a very interesting take on the story. And his wife, actually, Sharon Tate, was killed like the following year when she was pregnant, and she's killed by a gang of, the Charles Manson gang. And so it's kind of a weird parallel that, there's this whole story with this crazy gang of people that are, controlling this woman's body and her pregnancy, and then something similar happens to his wife the next year. It's bizarre. But anyway, I'm glad that we watched it because it's such a great spooky film, and it's very interesting, like you were saying, to see kind of what's changed and what hasn't in terms of how a woman and how her body is, has like just how the evolution of our rights as women and our stance in society and what hasn't changed. I think is even more interesting. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you. My final thoughts are it's just amazing to me to see this movie in context of other horror films going on at the time, because it's 1968 and it's showing us New York. It's showing us real Americans dealing with real American stuff, and then playing with how crazy it is that there's a witch's coven and there's a real devil, and there's all that stuff. There's the magic of these numbers. So we're getting a movie that really uses some of those things in our modern context. And it's 1968, which means that at the same time, you've got the Hammer movies are still going on, and they're in the middle, they're about to start. They're about to start their Carmilla cycle, which are good old-fashioned Gothics, just like they had been doing since 1958. So, for the past, 10 years and still going for another 5 or so, you've got at the same time people could go watch Rosemary's Baby, and then they'll go watch, Gothic horror movies where Vincent Price or buxom women in the strange white gowns wander around castles. All that stuff is going on at the same time, and it's all considered normal. In other words, you couldn't really relieve. It'd be difficult to release a true Gothic horror today. I think. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, Woman in Black.
Yeah, that's true. Which I still haven't seen. So maybe I'm totally completely wrong.
And it did quite well at the box office.
So maybe we'll see more. But I mean, basically, the Gothic era is just about to start its last legs, and Rosemary's Baby is bringing in the whole modern horror era, because this is going to happen, and then it's going to be, bam, The Exorcist and The Omen, and all those movies, and the Gothics are going to disappear. So this movie is important to horror history, but it's really good. I loved watching it. I agree with what Tony said, that it's kind of slow moving. It has that sort of modern feel, like other things of the time, like, I don't know, like Don't Look Now and Deliverance and things like that are sort of dreamy and slow moving. But it's really, it is really good. So endorsements, I'm curious what you guys want to endorse. So let's go in the same direction. Drew, do you have anything you want to share with us?
I got 2 things. I got a personal endorsement and I guess a quote-unquote product endorsement. My product endorsement, I am endorsing BBC's Sherlock, particularly Season 2, which has just been released on DVD. General public consensus of me is that I'm first and foremost a horror movie fan, and that's true, but I'm also a big fan of detective fiction and mysteries, and Sherlock Holmes is a character that I've loved since a child, and this is an excellent. They basically, what they've done, if you haven't seen, is they've transplanted all these Victorian characters from the Victorian era, and they've basically taken Sherlock Holmes and been like, well, what if Sherlock Holmes existed now, and how would he operate within the 21st century? And it's a good updating, and actually, in a lot of respects, strangely more traditional than the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes, which is very sort of, action movie, sort of steampunky version. And I like both. I'm not knocking the Robert Downey Jr. movies. I think they're
no, I agree with you. I know you're not, but I mean, I'll say it. The BBC version that you're talking about is 1,000 times better than the Robert Downey Jr. movies.
It's more cerebral.
I disagree that it's 1,000 times better. It's just different.
Oh no,
it's different. It's different. They're both good. They're both
okay.
They're both good.
Maybe I'm being offensive, but I mean, my gosh, it's so good. You're totally right. It's more wonderful.
It's much more cerebral, and it's much more of, and they're very similar. Their take on Sherlock Holmes as being kind of a dysfunctional human being instead of being Basil Rathbone is actually kind of similar, but. I don't know if you like Sherlock Holmes or if you just like detective shows, and you like particularly well-written detective shows, rent this. And actually, the seasons, there are only 3 or 4 episodes of seasons, but the episodes are the length of film. So you're basically getting 3 Sherlock Holmes movies for the price of renting a TV show. And
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
it's like Columbo. You're getting like 3 movies a year.
And, if you're a Star Trek fan, the guy that plays Sherlock Holmes in this is going to be playing Khan in the sequel to the Star Trek movie that's coming out. So you can check him out and see what kind of actor he is. My second endorsement, I completely spaced that there almost for a second. This Friday at Elysium, it's the second annual Summer Shock Hop. I got a great lineup of bands: the Humanoids, Mariachi's Del Inferno, Danger Cakes, and the Sandworms, which are a amazing, no other way to describe them, a gothic surf rock band. Like if you could picture the child that Dick Dale and Danny Elfman would have, this is what it would sound like. There's also going to be a zombie surfing contest and a pinup contest. So come on down. It starts at 9 o'clock at Elysium. It's $5 cover, and it is 18 and up. Wow.
I just heard Dick Dale today, by the way, doing this crazy surf rock version of Haben Nagila that I've got to post. So that's fantastic. All right, thank you very much. So what again is the name of the zombie surf rock band?
The Sandworms, like from
the
Beatles.
Sandworms. Okay, let's make a note of it on the page. Okay, Tony, any endorsements?
Well, I just went to Armadillo Con, which is definitely, I'm kind of one of the few comics people. It's very much a more literary convention. More novelists are there, and old school sci-fi. Luminaries, and I had a blast. It's always fun. It's like I feel like I'm always a little bit out of my depth sometimes because there's just so many awesome people there, and who deserve much respect, and that was really awesome and treated really great. Had great panels. And caught up with a bunch of people. So I highly recommend if you can go to Armadillo Con if you're in Austin. It's great. And I also felt really like Joe Lansdale is always there, who wrote Bubba Hotep and a host of other things. And when I see his table laid out, and I go, oh, I'm a writer. I've written a couple of comics. And then you see a table full of somebody's work, or several tables full of somebody's work. Yeah, I'm not really. I don't know if I can call myself a writer now. And he's an awesome guy with great stories, too. So, but yeah, Armadillo Con, and trying to think what else other than SciComm is quite a while away, so I don't know if I want to plug it a whole bunch more. But we also have some plans for SciComm that we need to finalize soon. Again, Right Stuff. If you haven't shopped there for anime or manga or books, then they're really, truly awesome about releasing on demand. I have nothing but awesome things to say about them because of how they've handled everything. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So we should probably post their link up there too. And well, we can post the SciComm link. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, SciComm Volume 3 is coming out. Very cool. Julia, any endorsements?
Well, of course, it sounded like a broken record, but Alex Van Helsing, Triumph of Death, just came out, so I'll get to that. And then I would totally agree about Sherlock. I think Sherlock is an awesome show, and if you're into Sherlock, you should also, now that the series is ended of House is just modern day Sherlock, but in a hospital, because Holmes and Watson are the same as House and Wilson. And it's a really fun show, and I miss it a lot. I was just thinking about it today, going, I can't believe there's not going to be any more new House. But yeah, both great programs to take in.
Sherlock is really very House, by the way. I mean, the way they do it, that's just, and I love that it's Columbo style again, where you have 3 90-minute episodes a year. So that's outstanding.
By the way, I hate to butt in. I did this last time, but I did
go crazy.
Something. Actually, CD Baby, who hosts our online ordering of our album for Deserts of Mars, people ask all the time, like, well, how can I give you the most money, right? For 5 days, I guess starting today, if you order the MP3 version of our album on CD Baby, all the proceeds for that go to the band directly. So there's no fees, nothing. Like that digital copy goes straight to, all the money goes to us, and they're doing that as a promotion for all CD Baby. There's a bunch of bands, Amanda Lepre, I think our friend Unmothered might be there, maybe Boars, a bunch of Austin bands. I should look it up and try to, I kind of hate to do that in case I miss a friend of ours and they get put out, but definitely I'll mention those and apologize in advance if I don't know that you're on CD Baby. But
and the album that you're talking about is Transmission, correct?
It does with Mars Transmission. You can find it if you look on the CD Baby page. I'll post a link. But
it's very cool.
For these next 5 days, they're doing a really cool thing where all the money goes directly to the band. So that's pretty cool. Sorry,
very cool.
I interrupted.
No. Julia, did you have anything else to endorse?
No, I'm done.
Okay, the only thing I would mention, I'm not afraid of log rolling at all. Totally, Alex Van Helsing, Triumph of Death is out, so check it out. Look for reviews. We've gotten a couple of people weighed in on Amazon, and I'm really happy about that. Just like Tony and I have SciComm 3, and people have been saying nice things on the web about that, which is cool. And we've seen a lot of neat art from middle schoolers drawing the girl in SciComm with Snow, which I think is fantastic. The only thing two things that I would mention that are almost directly related to what Drew said. First of all, I'm totally going to check out the Sandworms. That sounds great. I've been listening to Pandora, particularly a surf rock station that I just love. So if you want to figure out a way to sort of enjoy your summer and kind of be in another place, just look for the Sandals, who did a whole bunch of groovy surf rock back in the 60s, and create a station around that, and you'll find yourself just feeling like you're hanging out on the beach in 1968, and it's really wonderful. So yeah, endless surf rock radio is where I've been spending my days, and it's made my life a lot more bearable. And also, Blood and Roses, 1960. You have to see this movie if you have Netflix streaming. It is on Netflix streaming for free. It was by Roger Vadim, and it's a Karnstein lesbian vampire movie with a crazy psychedelic hallucination towards the end. It's wonderful. And so if you dig Eurotrash, this is one of the best Eurotrash movies I've ever seen. So that's all I have. I'm really thankful that everybody's been on. Please leave comments for us at the Facebook page, like us on iTunes, tell your friends. If everybody out there grabbed a listener next time around, we'll just grow and grow, and that's what I want to see happen. So thank you, everybody, and thanks to the audience, and we will see you next week.
Ciao.
Ciao.